Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our 2020 National Coffee Day coming up on September 29th. My name is Thomas Easley, and I'm here at Trifecta Coffee Company in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And today we have two gentlemen combined. Do you guys have, are we looking at 100 years of combined coffee experience between Bill Fishbein and the Coffee Trust? And today we have Scott Brant from Coffeelands Foundation.
Yeah, I'd say it's more like 85 years for Bill and maybe 15 years for me.
But at least 100, at least 100.
Okay, I started in 78.
Okay. And I started in 82, so.
You're late starters, Scott.
I know. I had heard about Bill, and I said, I got to get into that business.
Yeah. There wasn't much to hear about in 82 for me.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And for our audience, everybody, I think, has become very acquainted with Bill Fishbein from the Coffee Trust up in Santa Fe. But today we have a new guest that we haven't introduced to our customers and to a lot of people, I think, as we're going to be sharing this video with the Coffee Trust and with Cocoa Miel customers and so forth. And Scott Brant, who's a longtime coffee roaster from Montana Coffee Trading Company, and has more recently started an organization called Coffeelands Foundation, and that's how I met you, Scott.
Right.
Is our visit to Guatemala in 2018 with Bill and some folks from Cafe Ibis and Dave Merriman from Java Joe's up in Santa Fe. So thank you so much, Scott, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit on some of our other videos about Coffeeland Foundation. We just kind of mentioned it. So I thought it would be a great opportunity for you to sort of share where did the idea come from? You've been in coffee for so many years. How did you come up with the idea of Coffeeland Foundation? What does it do? And what are some of the organizations that you work with?
Well, we started in 2015, and I retired from actively being involved with Montana Coffee Traders in 2014. But it was during that time that I actually was having some conversations with Bill about how I was going to retire, but I also had a real interest in how can I do something that would give back to the people that have supported me and supported our business and so many businesses for all the years by growing coffee. And it's always been a big interest in mine in trying to balance the disparity between struggling coffee farmers and, well, at times struggling coffee roasters and retailers too. But, you know, it's their product that drives our businesses. And so I was actually going to work with Bill on some aspect of the Coffee Trust. We hadn't really worked out what that would be. And at some point I thought, maybe I could expand the idea, and the idea of a foundation came to mind where I could raise money through coffee roasters to help fund organizations like the Coffee Trust and some other nonprofits that I'll talk about. And the reason I wanted to do that was because it kind of gave me a step removed from being directly involved with the nonprofits that were managing these great programs. I'm not a project manager. I just want to see if I can raise funds to help these organizations. So the idea of a foundation came around, and about that same time, the kind of the basis that we raise money through is called the Penny a Pound program. And so I mostly work with coffee roasters, and they're and the coffee importers, about 6 different coffee importers at the present time. So when a coffee roaster like yourself, Thomas, buys coffee from your importer, a penny a pound of that coffee purchase goes directly to, is set aside for the Coffeelands Foundation. And my impetus for this was that for small to medium-sized roasters, any roaster for that matter, if it comes time to write a check to your favorite charity or some project that you want to support, a lot of things come into play, like maybe you want to give your employees a bonus, or maybe it hasn't been as good a year as you hoped it would be. So that writing that check is always a challenge. And so I wanted to make something that would be kind of automatic, efficient, kind of out of sight, out of mind, so that when you're buying your coffee purchase, when you're buying it from your importers, there's an automatic payment. It's a little bit like going to the gas station, and you know, you're just paying for that gallon of gas, but there's also taxes involved, and you're sort of aware that there's money's going in different directions, but you don't never think about that. That's just the price of the gas. And similar for the price of coffee, we know as coffee roasters, coffee buyers, that the price fluctuates based on the New York C market. It fluctuates daily, oftentimes more than a penny, you know, several cents, or, you know, it just depends on the time of the year. So I wanted to make it kind of seamless and effortless for people to contribute to this. And it works for the roasters that we've signed up. I think over the time that we have been involved, we've collected money from over 110 container loads of coffee, which really, I love thinking about that. It really adds up.
Adds up to that many. Wow, that's good. Well, and we've only been on the program, what, like a year now, and it's like you said, it's worked out really well. We don't have to think about it. It's sort of like having a savings account with sort of just automatically withdraws, and we know every time we get an invoice from our broker, we see, you know, how many dollars it adds up to, and it's like you said, it's been very convenient. So now you've worked with several different nonprofits, of which one of them is the Coffee Trust, and I would love to hear about some of the other entities that you work with. But how did you first meet Bill, and like how did that connection happen?
Well, Bill and I met at the we'd see each other like once a year at the SCAA annual convention, wherever that was, and I would be there on Coffee Traders Business, and Bill was there on at the time Coffee Kids, and then later the Coffee Trust. And so we had some mutual friends that we discovered that gave us a chance to kind of catch up, and then I was interested in what Bill was doing, and he was always interested in what I was up to, and so we just kind of gradually developed a friendship. And then I think it was in 2013, somewhere in there, I was a participant in one of the Cup of Excellence judging competitions in Guatemala. And after the competition was over, I went with Bill up to Shahul and visited the Chohalense cooperative, and from that we met Arcadio, the manager, or I met Arcadio, the manager, and I also got to see the programs that the Coffee Trust was doing at the time, which was centered around women's empowerment and food security, trying to find ways to improve the lives of the coffee farmers in the region. And so we invited Arcadio to come to Montana so he could see what we were doing with his coffee. And he spoke very little English, understood, I think, more than he could speak, but he came up and spent about a week with us, and we cupped coffee. We cupped coffees from all over the world alongside the Chajalense coffee, so he could actually see what this operation was all about. And it was a very rich experience and deepened our relationship considerably. And then from then on, this was, I think I went with Bill a couple of times, and there was a trip with you. I think I've been up to that region 3 different times. And each time I got to get a deeper appreciation for the work that was going on. So that's how Bill and I met and have developed this fairly long-term relationship now. You can add
It's getting long.
there,
It's
Bill.
getting long, Scott.
You can edit it at anything you want at this point.
Okay.
Is that how you remember it, Bill?
Not at all. Not at all. No. Actually, that's exactly how it happened. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I also work with 3 other NGOs, nonprofits. Another one in Guatemala, which is Pueblo a Pueblo, and they operate out of Santiago de Atitlan on the lake, Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And they have the first project that I was supporting was their organic school garden project. And they had 11 different schools in the region. There's communities that are around the lake that they go to the different schools and help the students start a little garden plot that they grow vegetables in, and then they serve the vegetables in the school lunches. But more importantly, it's giving kids showing them how to raise food other than coffee. It's a little bizarre at times thinking about coffee farmers and having to show them ways to raise food, but that's how far we've come away from the agricultural lifestyle that was natural for most farmers a while back. It's become very concentrated on coffee. And subsequently, not long before I started the foundation, they came out with a report about that there was seasonal hunger in the coffee growing world, which meant that after the coffee harvest, you have your money, you pay your bills, you maybe improve the farm, the house, and fairly soon the money's all gone, and now you've got to wait till the next harvest and the next inflow of cash. Not a lot of diversification of income for a lot of small coffee farmers. And so they discovered that families were going hungry for 3 to 4 months of the year, experiencing seasonal, and they have I forget what the term for it is, but they acknowledge, oh yeah, we have to cut back on how much we eat during this time.
Wow.
And that really kind of, it was something that you were probably aware of, but not directly until it was brought out in the report how prevalent it was. And so one of the things that we like to see is programs that are addressing food security and giving people more of a determination of their fate by growing their own food and being able to supply their families with food. It's an empowering idea. And that's one of the programs that the Coffee Trust has been involved in and had some very innovative and interesting approaches to it. And
we were there, right? We got to see some of the gardens that they were putting together. I remember that one garden. It was such a vivid experience. This woman was so proud of her. I mean, she had every type of vegetable growing at the same time, and I think also that was when I think she was also doing the chickens, right, Bill? And they were using the EMs when the chickens were getting pecked at, and they were doing their own composting, and they were using the worms to feed the chickens and the compost for the garden. How is that program going, Bill, right now?
The program continues without us. We don't support it any longer. The women are continuing it on their own. It worked well for the women who were in the program. That said, the Coffee Trust, our goals are that it spreads throughout the community on its own. And that became very difficult. So the promoters that we were working with, their family gardens were developing very nicely. They were training other people. And the idea was for the other people to train other people. And whereas the first part of the project worked well, it's still working right now, the training component never took root. One of the reasons why it didn't take root is we're in this particular region, in the Ixil region of Guatemala, the trust factor it hardly exists from family to family, from sometimes within families. It's because of their the history they've had there. They were completely ravaged during the war, and families took one side, or neighbors took one side. Some people were with the military, some people were with the insurgents, and it was a devastating, war for the people in the Ixil region. The massacres were not to be believed. As anything you've ever heard took place there. It's as bad as you've ever heard. So what has been left with the community is a deep sense of mistrust. And with the women in the community, it's even thicker than with the men who are farmers. The men who are farmers and they're working for the same cooperative, many of the farmers are on different sides, but it doesn't seem to matter. They're bringing their coffee to the same processor and they're selling it, and they seem to work out all right. But the women, they see each other every day. They're not on their own farm. They see each other every day. And there was a lot of bitterness and a great deal of mistrust. So that making that leap where the trained women would then go on to train others, it really never took place. And that's what we do at the Coffee Trust. We're very keenly aware that once we stop the training, unless it's going on by itself, it's just going to stop right there. And that's not what our goals are. We're not just here to satisfy our own desire to do good, but rather to make something stick. And we just didn't want to just keep putting money into a program that we knew was not going to go anywhere than where it was.
That's interesting. Now,
so we moved on from that program.
Have you seen similar situations in the areas that you work in, Scott, or is it just different?
I've seen that situation similarly elsewhere, but it's really thick in the Ixil region. Okay. Really, really thick. Very, very difficult. The methodology that we use is called campesino, farmer to farmer. And generally, when a farmer trains his neighbor, the neighbor feels so appreciative, the neighbor will train his neighbor. And it's a little more complicated than that, but basically it's lateral learning from one neighbor to the next. And it works with coffee farmers. It works really well with them. But it didn't work in this particular program. We're working in 2 communities, and it just wasn't working. And there were fights amongst the families, and it was just not working. So we had to bring that program to a stop. That doesn't mean we're done with it. That we have other fish to fry at the moment, and there's not much oil in the pan. So that we've got, a fair amount of work to do, but, we'll, circle back and see if we can find a way that would notch and groove in those communities, where they could train themselves. We're not there yet, though.
Mm-hmm. I think in where I was talking about the organic school gardens in Santiago and those communities, there's similar factor. It depends on the school administrators, how actively they participate in the gardens. So Pueblo would commit to a 3-year training program with people coming and showing them how to do it and helping them through 3 different seasons, and then basically turn it over to the school to carry on the garden after that. The last time I was down there, which was 2 years ago, they had most of the gardens continuing to operate. Some didn't take off at all because the administrator didn't understand it or wasn't behind it, or the teachers who were really the people who were taking the kids in the gardens and showing them what to do. If one was very enthusiastic and knowledgeable about it, the program would flourish. Otherwise, it needed the outside push for Pueblo. What they did instead, which is still ongoing, was they started a youth entrepreneurial program, which actually brings teenagers in from the various communities, and they train them in their demonstration garden. And then these youths go back to the schools and help start the gardens, which is still a work in progress. There's still, COVID has knocked a lot of this off because the schools being shut down and such. But they did things like the kids decided that they wanted to come up with a economic program. So they said they focused on mushroom growing. And so they're gathering information on how to grow mushrooms and then sell those mushrooms in the markets. But I feel real hopeful that having the kids from the community, living in the community, be involved in those gardens will be have more of a long-term impact in the communities. And also the kids are learning so much. They're, like they say, it's an entrepreneurial program, so they're learning valuable skills that they'll be able to carry on with them as they go through life.
If I could poke in for a bit, I think that's a great program. And the concept of teaching children in school and having the parents, join in is great, because the kids come out with a skill. They come out with a skill. They're born sort of into that skill. It becomes second nature to them. And hopefully when they, become older adults, they will apply those skills. And the difference between the program that we run and the one that Pueblo runs is that we're working with adults. And what we learned a long time ago is adults don't learn from professionals. Adults learn, they'll listen to a professional, they'll respect the professional. And then basically the experience they have is, I really wish I was as educated as that professional, but I'm not, and I could never do what they do. As opposed to the campesino, farmer to farmer methodology, where a neighbor trains a neighbor, the experience that the farmer has is, whoa, if he can do it, so can I. So in training adults is very different than training children, and they do have actual school structures in St. Lucas Soliman, where that's where Pueblo is, I believe. Is that correct? St. Lucas Soliman?
Well, out of Santiago is their headquarters. Oh,
yeah, that's their headquarters, right? Where was I when I was visiting them? I thought it was on that the school was there. Their office was
They
there.
do
at
have
one
a
time. Yeah.
school in Toliman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they've got a really good structure. In fact, the woman that we were working with, because we worked in San Pedro, La Laguna, and
Oh, yeah.
Maria Carmen's husband, Salvador, was one of the teachers at the school there.
Mhm.
And they have a structure there where the kids actually go to school. I mean, it's like they've got something there, and there's nothing like that exists in the Ashil region.
Yeah.
In fact, in the Ashil region, most kids go to school to maybe the second grade, and that's it.
Mhm.
So you lose them after the second grade. And it's a very different community. The program that they do at Pueblo Pueblo is very effective when working with children who actually go to the school and stay there. So.
Yeah. There's so many levels of need and help that can be given, and education is really important. And educational scholarships is something that the foundation tries to support. In Pueblo, we do have a primary education scholarship that we support on a monthly basis. And I know the Bill and the library, Limitless Horizons in Shahul, are also very involved in education and starting at that level. I mean, it is pretty shocking when Bill says that it's second grade is about as far as they go in education. And we all know how important it is and to have a good education. And you see it with the young people that come to work for the Coffee Trust, who come to work for Pueblo and end up running these programs. They're very motivated and talented people because they've had that experience. They've had some education and they're continuing their education in these programs. And it's something that we like to support as much as possible.
You know, Thomas, I'd like to bring up one subject that Scott opened the door on, which was in and around 2000 and, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, I can't remember, when Hunger for the Coffeelands, when Green Mountain, or was it Rick Pizer? Yeah, Rick Pizer did this film. In fact, the Coffee Trust sponsored that film. And at that time, the industry responded by saying, "Oh my God, this hunger exists every single year. This is not new." Well, you know, I'm sitting there, and everyone on my team is sitting there, is saying, "We've been talking about this for 20 years." It's remarkable how people hear things when they're ready to hear them. Mm-hmm. Because for 20 years, like in Rick's film, they talk about, I think, los tiempos de los flacos, the thin months. Okay.
Thin months,
and
right?
And recognizing in the film that they actually have a name for this. Well, back in 1990 or 92, 93, the name that we heard was El Tiempo del Silencio, the silent months, the silent times, because there was no food then. There was no food then. And there hasn't been food. And through Coffee Kids and the Coffee Trust, we would speak about this time and time again. And finally, a film is done and everybody goes, "Oh my God, look what's happening." Hello, you know, it's like when people are ready to hear it, that's the only time they're going to hear it. Mm-hmm. And so it's today, I don't know what people are hearing either.
Yeah. Yeah, the issues seem to go around and kind of, it may be shade-grown coffee at one time. It may be, I think the last issue that was really kind of a hot button item for the SCA was the living conditions and the standards for the coffee pickers. I mean, you've got small coffee farmers who are struggling as it is, but they've got to hire people to come in and pick the coffee, and they're kind of the lowest of the low on this coffee ladder, so to speak. And it does get people's attention for a while, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to start this coffee foundation and find like-minded roasters who I think people's hearts are in the right place. They want to support good projects, and I want to make it easy for them to do that. And Bill and I have had long conversations about how, you know, the whole industry could be involved and make a real impact. But the reality is the whole industry is not involved, and we can try and make steps in that direction. But for now, we got to work with what we've got.
Indeed. Just one other thing, if I might interject, Thomas, that Scott just hit the nail on the head, that these issues are so important that it shouldn't be left to what's the most popular, you know, challenge in the trade this year. This year we're going to be supporting this, or next year we might support that. It's like these are issues that the farmers face every single day, 24/7, 365 days a year, every single year. And it's just too important that it shouldn't be just whatever the marketing issue is of the time, or what, to depend upon what is popular to the public. It's like this is way too important for that. And that's one of the reasons that, and the big issue, at least for me, is that, and we've been talking about this for as long as I've been in the trade, that the commodities market dominates the price of coffee, keeps the price of coffee low, and keeps the farmers always the poorest. And the farmers, as long as they can't make a living for themselves, they've got to work with nonprofits like the Coffee Trust, like Coffeelands, like the other nonprofits, to give some sort of assistance to them. But they need to be included in the market, and they're not. And the trade will talk about it all day long. Oh, this is terrible. The farmers, the price is so low, and they'll scream about it. But nobody wants to pay more for their coffee. And the only time it's going to get better when people actually are willing to pay more for their coffee, and when that money will go back to the farmers. That's the only time there'll be a real fundamental change in the way the trade is done. And that looks like it's going to be a few hundred years away. Anyway.
Well, and just got disconnected because of our timeout. So, Bill, you were saying, again, just a really great way of roasters without getting their head all on the clouds is just if we do this penny for pound project.
You got to call Scott Brant and do penny a pound. I mean, this is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer for roaster retailer. I can't speak for the wholesalers who work on very thin margins. I can't speak for them, but I bet they could make a deal with Scott to give them a percentage of a penny if they had to. And they could do that too. Every one of them could do that. Every single one of them. And so it's ridiculous, you know, that people don't participate in that level. I'm sure that they could make a deal with Scott if their margins are so thin, their volume is so great, they could make a smaller commitment. It would work fine. But if you're roaster retail, you can't handle a penny a pound, you might as well close your business right away. Like my business is come on right in. Okay, thank you. Whatever that.
I agree.
So in addition to Scott, for you, in addition to the Coffee Trust and Adobe is the Pueblo. I'm in New Mexico. I'm used to Adobes. Pueblo. What are, and I'm bringing this up because if you are a roaster and you don't know about other organizations and you talk to Scott, you have other entities that you work with.
Right.
What are those?
Yeah, there's two others that we actively support. One is Food for Farmers, and that was a nonprofit that started as a direct result of this film that Bill talked about with Rick Pizer helped to start this, addressing programs that are going to put food on farmers' tables, ideally. They work with co-ops in Mexico. They work with a co-op in Guatemala, I think a couple different ones, in income diversification. And this is something that Coffee Trust is very involved in, and it's kind of what they one of the fundamental approaches that they're trying to take is to help farmers earn money outside of coffee so that they're not so dependent on coffee. And that was the whole premise of Coffee Kids, if I'm correct.
That's what it used to be, yeah.
And so Food for Farmers works in Colombia, Nicaragua, Mexico, Guatemala, and has some pretty active programs. Beekeeping is one of the main income go-tos at this point, because it's fairly easy for a coffee farmer to get into raising bees and using the income from the honey to not only sell locally, but in some cases they've created international markets. I know Coffee Trust and Chahalense Cooperative has been very active with the honey production. The one other organization that's been around for quite a while is Grounds for Health, and they do cervical cancer screening in Africa for women in the coffee world, and that has been a fantastic program. Has saved many lives by doing this screening for women who have a chance of having cervical cancer. And they've through COVID and through the virus, these programs have been impacted pretty heavily, and they have Grounds for Health is creating a home test now, so that women can actually test themselves at home to find out if they. And I should know exactly more about how it works, but if they have, if they test positive, then they go in for further testing for the cervical cancer. If they test negative, then they're good to go. And so that's been a fantastic program, and I think one of the most widely supported nonprofits in the coffee world at this point that I'm aware of. And those are the primarily the four that we do. Occasionally we come across different programs that are involved in, I mentioned Limitless Horizons. We'll send them some money to help out in there. They run a library in Shahul and do educational scholarships that, you know, we want to support. And so there's programs. Food security, I mentioned, is a big one. Food security and seasonal hunger. Education, access to healthcare is a real important aspect of what we look at. There's the economic diversity is another big one. I think we've talked about mushrooms. Growing mushrooms is a real possibility. They do sell mushrooms in some of these markets that we visited in Central America, and I know from personal experience that it's not that difficult to get into growing mushrooms, and they're nutritious and can be sold in the market and eaten at home. These are the kind of programs that we really like to see. And but again, as Bill has mentioned, if it's coming from the community, coming from the individuals, it stands a much more viable chance of being successful than for an outside organization to come in and say, here's what you need to do to change your lives.
Right. Now, one other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when I spoke to you early on about Coffeelands Foundation, you even said that if I had another nonprofit that I was already working with, that you would also be able to work with, if a retail roaster was already working with another entity, would you be able to interface the penny for pound program with other nonprofits that are out there besides the ones you just talked about?
Yes. At this point, I don't have any roasters who are saying, "Oh, I want to support this project," but I'm certainly willing to talk about these things. There's a, you know, I think that roasters have given me a pretty wide latitude of what to do with the money, and I'm just a one-man operation here, so
Right.
my expenses very low. The money that comes in is pretty much going out, and you know, it's modest. 110 containers of coffee sounds like a lot, but that's really not that much. So I can use more roasters. I could use more importers participating in the penny a pound program. And as Bill said, it could be a really powerful instrument for helping support great programs.
So what's the best way for people to contact you, Scott? What are you want to just plug your website?
Coffeelands.org.
Okay.
The Coffeelands Foundation at Gmail. I think if you just Google Coffeelands, you'll find us. We have a website and you know, email, and you can just.
It's all up there.
Yeah. The importer I'm actively working with right now is Royal Coffee out of Oakland, Atlas Coffee in Seattle, Inter-American based out of Houston. They also work with Inter-American in, I don't know where they're, back east, but they're all part of a larger organization. Cape Horn Coffee is the one that you work with. Thomas has been very, very supportive and very helpful. The Vornus Coffee in California, Andrew Vornus has been very supportive. And Sustainable Harvest, David Griswold has also been very helpful. But there are plenty of other coffee importers out there, and we could greatly expand our program if we got more roasters and more importers.
That's why we're connecting today. Hope to get the word out and just keep plugging away day by day. So
I would suggest that people who are seeing this and want to say they're working with other importers, to talk to their broker and say, listen, I hear about the Coffeelands Foundation. I would really like to support that. How can I do that? And that, if they're hearing it from their customers, they're going to pay a lot more attention than hearing it from me trying to, you know, sell them another program.
that's what I did with Cape Horn. Is, you know, I was like, hey, I want to do this program, and we were with another broker, and it wasn't working out that way, and so we were like, when we got a very good reception from Cape Horn, we were like, you know, they get it. So,
yeah, exactly.
Now, I'm going to go back a little bit in your history, Scott. So you were roasting what, at least 30 years in your past life.
Mm-hmm.
When you were in that stage of your coffee world career, were you engaged in the same way, or was that something that it just took all those years to kind of end up where you are now, or were you always engaged in different projects like that?
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I have a very clear memory of being aware of how little we were paying the farmer for the coffee. I think it was they were lucky if they were getting 80 cents a pound for their green coffee, and if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't too long ago that it was a very similar number going on. And we're talking, 30 some years later that this is still the case. But our first involvement at Montana Coffee Traders was through the owner, RC Beal, going to Costa Rica and going up to the Monteverde region and meeting Carlos Vargas, who was the manager of the Monteverde Co-op, and saying, working out a deal, we'll buy your coffee from you and we'll roast it and sell it as Cafe Monteverde. And from every pound of coffee that we send, we'll send you $1. We'll give you $1 a pound back.
Wow.
And that was a very successful, very interesting long-term relationship that we developed with the co-op. They were able to, from the money that they raised, were able to buy a coffee roaster and start roasting coffee locally. And now there's lots of different co-ops that sell coffee in most of the coffee growing regions that I visited. There are active roasters that are selling to the local market, which I just get such a kick out of, because at the time that we visited in Costa Rica, most of the farmers had not ever tasted their own coffee. They didn't know how to, it was just a cherry that they sold at the market or sold at the beneficio and got their money and went home. So we went to Monteverde. We took a popcorn popper with us. We took the green coffee, we roasted it, we brewed it up in a French press and let them taste their own coffee. And it was like light bulbs going off. It was like, wow, this is, well, I can't say that they all said, wow, this is really great, because coffee is kind of an acquired taste, but that was the start of what we call the dollar back program. And
what program?
Dollar back. Yeah. And I notice there's other coffee roasters that do this. It's a kind of a good, people like to buy the coffee because they know that they're participating in helping give money back. And as I mentioned before, roasters have good hearts. Customers have good hearts. If they know that their money is going in a good direction, they will vote with their dollars in that direction. Not everybody, but most people. And
well, I, as a roaster, I appreciate both the work that you, Bill, have done over the decades, and your experience, Scott. I consider both of you sort of like mentors for young roasters like myself, and just it's good to know that I can always talk to you guys and get a good sense of what's the right thing to do and how to go about doing it. Because sometimes we're, like you said, we're in the business world and we're just trying to sort of figure our way through things. And when we're able to lift our head out of the sand, it's good to talk to people that have had this very long experience in the industry. As we said, okay, maybe it's not a century, but it's getting there.
We're working on it. Just look at us.
Yeah.
Just look at us. We're working on it.
But that's impressive when you think about that many years of experience and the things that you guys have seen and the cycles. The fact that, I believe it was last year, Scott, when coffee went below $1 at the C price.
I know.
Dean Sycon, we were doing an interview with Dean Sycon that day. Oh, my battery's going low here. Let me hit pause for one moment.
And for Scott, for me, for Rick Pizer, for a number of other people who have dedicated themselves to helping coffee producers, and Scott going beyond that, that we're in this because we love to do it. And we have a passion to do this kind of work, that in our wildest dreams, 100 years from now, or 125, 150 years from now, when the work that we may have started actually materializes into something that is what we had hoped it would. Like I said, we won't be around to see it. And I can speak for Scott. I know him well enough to know that we won't be recognized, and we don't care. We're not doing it to be recognized next year, 20 years from now, or 100 years from now. We do this because we absolutely have a passion for this work. We know it's the right thing to do for people in our own trade, one of the greatest industries on the planet. And it is ill. The industry is ill, and it needs to heal. And so we're starting something, you know, even as 30 years is a short period of time. We're starting something to heal the trade. And we are so privileged to be in this position that we do the work because we love to do it. And
I agree, Bill. I agree. It just occurred to me, you know, we're planting seeds. And what is coffee? Coffee is but a seed. You know, it's an actual seed. I remember I think the first year that we were open, we received a shipment of green coffee, maybe a couple of years, and it was in October. It was cold out. There was frost on the ground, and we got some green coffee in it. There was some on the ground outside, and a few days after, you know, some of the beans that had spilled out of the bags, I went out and I looked at some of the beans, and they were actually sprouting.
what, the green bean?
Really?
Yeah, green beans. I still don't know because it wasn't parchment coffee, but the actual green bean was sending out a little shoot. And I went, oh my gosh, it was like I hadn't made the connection between what we brew is actually what could be planted. Well, it can't. You can't take a green bean and stick it in the ground and have it grow because there's damage to the silver skin in the processing. But maybe because it was cold out and the conditions were just right, but those beans sprouted. Maybe it was just a little message from the future for me. I don't know.
Maybe so. Or maybe those beans hadn't been properly fermented or processed.
Yeah.
That's what could have done it. But that would have blown me away if I'd have seen that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great.
So we're just planning.
Yep.
But even so, it's not all in the future. There's impact right now. There's good work being done right now, and that's what we want to support. Is the work right at this moment.
Well,
We're
Scott,
a couple of seedy characters, is what we are.
well, yeah. Well, I'm going to wrap up the interview. I want to thank both of you for, first of all, connecting over coffee for National Coffee Day. I couldn't think of two greater people to get on at the same time. And, you know, again, I think it's important, like Bill's message, if you're a small coffee retailer, hey, if you're a big coffee retailer, check out Coffeelands Foundation, coffeelands.org, and contact Scott. And just see what the fit is. And you know, Scott has done, especially if you're new to the industry, I like to say, you know, it's important for my business. It was important that I vet people that come to me, and you know, they want to, you know, they want us to donate money, they want us to participate in local charities and things like that. And it is important to know who you're doing business with in that regard. And I can't speak high enough of both the work that Bill does at the Coffee Trust and what you do, Scott, at Coffeeland Foundation. And so I really rely, as a roaster, I rely on your guys' experience, and I just trust where your guys' hearts are, and just know that, you know, like Bill said, you know, you guys are not in it for yourselves. You're in it just for the long haul, to just make impact, make change, plant those seeds. And, you know, Bill, you've kind of, you know, planted seeds with me, you know, made me, you know, look at things a lot differently. And so that's, I think, one of the beautiful things of the coffee world is the people that I've met, and meeting the both of you has just been a privilege. So thank you both for joining us today.